Remuneration Committee. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the council for live and subsequent broadcast via the council internet site. I will begin by asking members to introduce themselves. Shall we go that way?
Sure. Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Marcia Islar-Gosling. I'm a councillor for Highgate Ward.
I'm Julia Davis. I'm councillor for Hermitage and Gardens Ward, and I'm a cabinet member for Communities and Civic Life.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Ibrahim. I'm the member for Bruce Castle Ward.
Councillor White. I'm Haiti D'Souza, Deputy Voluntary Officer.
And good day, Head of Employment, Reward and Transformation in HR.
Dan Paul, Chief People Officer. I'm Jack Booth, the Principal Committee Coordinator.
Thank you. Are there any apologies for absence? You haven't done anything. Items of urgent business.
We have a new exempt item of urgent business to consider as part of agenda item 16. The Chair has accepted this in accordance with section B, part 4B of the Local Government Act 1972. Chair is of the opinion that the report and the appendix should be considered at the meeting as a matter of urgency by reason of special circumstances. If the report is fully exempt and issues cannot be discussed in the public part of the meeting.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest people have to make? No. Are there any deputations and petitions? Yeah. No. Minutes of last meeting held on the 27th of June. Page 1 to 16. The agenda pack.
Actually, what's your agenda?
Record the minutes.
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 7 is Homes for Haringey integration update. Who's going to do that? Is that you, Mr. Joyce?
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. Well, good evening, members. I'm just here because I understand that the committee asked for an update on the insourcing of Homes for Haringey and how that is progressing and what our priorities are. That's obviously included a paper in your pack which sets out the steps that we've taken to, I suppose, one of the biggest insourcing endeavours that the council has undertaken in recent times. And because, as you'll see, it was around 70 staff in total. Clearly, our housing services were originally part of the council. There was a sort of two-stage outsourcing of, well, not really outsourcing, but there was a two-stage process where we set up the ALMO. First of all, to look after the landlord services of the council, covering our kind of maintenance and looking after the buildings, and also our housing management. And later years, our whole business and housing needs team transferred across. The cabinet made a decision to consider residents of bringing, and that consultation was undertaken, I suppose, about a year ago now. And there was actually really quite overwhelming support from residents to bring Haringey in-house. Alongside that, we did a lot of work with staff around what the opportunities would be around the integration of housing services within the council. And we also consulted on a senior management structure for how we would integrate Homes for Haringey within the council when it came across, and in your pack are the structures that were agreed as part of that process. But in a high level, effectively the landlord services, so the housing property services and housing management come into my direct. And then the housing needs functions, which many of you will know are headed up by Denise Gandy, have gone into the adults section of the council. One of the decisions we made was to have an operational director role with responsibility for oversight of the landlord functions, given the importance of those services to our residents who live in those homes, but also to recognise really that there is quite a lot of improvement work that needs to happen across those services and needs that dedicated leadership. The housing needs functions going into adults was seen as quite a big opportunity that came out of feedback from staff actually, who from within the council, but also within Homes for Harringay, who were recognising that there is a lot of opportunity for referral between services to work better when we're looking at the whole of, you know, the lives of the residents we're supporting in our housing stock. There's often the need to refer part of into our adult services, for instance. So that setup was what was put in place. What I would say is that what we haven't wanted to do is lose the links between housing needs and the landlord services. So we've still got a cross-council housing board, which includes all housing services, and that's the other teams within the council that were never in the hour. So our council house delivery team, for instance, are building the new council homes. The private sector housing team that sits in environment and neighbourhoods. So we bring all of those sort of services in the council with a housing remit together. So that was agreed, and the duty transfer of staff took place on the 1st of June of this year, and basically Homes for Harringay of the council. We no longer use the phrase Homes for Harringay, we say the council's housing services, obviously we did a lot of work with staff in preparation for that transfer in terms of staff workshops, in terms of welcome to the council events, meet and greets with the chief executive and directors. There's a whole series of sort of staff engagement exercises before and after the point of transfer, which still continue on today. And I know that there's an interest, the committee is interested in areas where we're looking for better integration of services, and there are, this is sort of guided by work that we're doing around an improvement plan for Homes for Harringay. This is work that's still undergoing. We've done a bit of a stock take as to how our housing services are performing at the point that they came into the council. There are a number of areas where we're not performing as well as we would like to be in terms of benchmark data around housing services. So things like satisfaction with our housing repair service is an example. Things like our void performance, when we have void units, how quickly we turn those around and let them. So there are a number of areas where we need to improve quite substantially our housing services. Also, grounds maintenance is another example. So putting in place an improvement plan around that, and there are opportunities by all being part of one council that are going to help that endeavour. So one of the areas where we've had issues in the past around the repairs performance, for instance, has been kind of relationship between the call centre, which has always been within the council, and the housing repair service, and how that kind of diagnostic and triaging stage when the customer first wants up happens, and where sometimes quite a number of our issues arise is that they don't, those at that stage they are not categorised correctly, and then that translates to being a problem for our housing repair service. That's all kind of housing focused, but I suppose the point to say is that there is a sort of staffing solution to this as well, and getting better working between those teams. We are already starting to see those relationships improve, and I think all being part of one organisation really helps with that endeavour. And also Beverly is Tarka and Denise Gandy are leading work with the other sections within adults around how we can improve the kind of you know, things like aids and adaptations and some of the kind of handoffs that happen between adult social services and housing. So there's a whole series of workshops going on there to sort of look at how we improve on that side of things. So that was kind of what I wanted to say by way of introduction. I think the staff that have come across have largely been really positive about coming back into the council. You know, there are always grumbles, but what I would say is quite a lot of those grumbles were about where, you know, probably grumbles that would have existed even if we continued with an Almo there, actually about staff saying we want to provide better services to residents and we want to be supported and resourced to do that. And so actually, I think it's been a largely positive reaction from staff coming across. And we've also worked well with the trade unions throughout the process. who all supported bringing it back into in so that's been largely a positive conversation as well.
Any questions, anybody? Yes, sir. It's Ali. Councillor Ali.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I've got two questions. I think one question is in terms of the issues. It's good to hear that staff are feeling quite positive, and that's really important because obviously it's a very unsettling time when you're trying to such a large function of the council. Sorry, large function of the council into the council. So I think that's really positive to hear that. I think one thing I'm keen to always know more, understand more, is how we're monitoring that satisfaction. So I think it'd be good to get some metrics in the future in terms of what their experiences are, what their feelings are, what the challenges are. Do they feel supported? Do they feel they can actually have a very open conversation with the higher ups that raise concerns about how they can feed to improve the service? So obviously as members, we have one element where we actually hear residents, we hear residents, but there's part who are on facing it. They are seeing these areas, and I'm very confident they've got a lot of great ideas in terms of how to transform or further enhance service. I'm more interested in that element. What processes are set up to actually give that voice to staff, what really practical, tangible solutions to problems they're seeing day to day. That's one question I have for you. And the other question is actually on the issue of the papers, the report that point to 24 relating. The further paper was taken to Cabinet 19th of July. That's great as well. What time do you want to say about when that'll be up and running? Because obviously, again, it would be great to have a tablet sharing those service so you can actually get into their experiences. But I think it's about giving resident voice, essentially, resident voice panel, what have you, want to come to boroughs, to learn very well. And the final point in terms of capacity, some of the issues you mentioned, to my understanding, issues, take voids, for example, or repairs. And one thing that, you know, people in this committee will know is that I'm very, we create more capacity in more creative ways. So whether it be, you know, powers that be, if we can free up more capacity to do things, apprenticeships, partnering with FE colleges, to actually bring in a whole range of people in-house, start building up our own capacity of spark keys or gas, you know, engineering, that kind of thing over time. That might require a long-term strategy, might require policy. At the moment, we are tendering contracts to different third-party sort of repair services, but I think it's my knowledge, it's my sort of personal aspiration, the odd of bringing it in, that we do more ourselves. And if that requires capacity, what sort of, you know, what's your view or vision for building that sort of repair capacity, for example, voice capacity, so we don't have those sort of regulations.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ali. I think it's interesting with the staff coming across and how do we measure it. I mean, I suppose the first thing to say, we don't have a scientific measurement of it because we haven't done a staff survey since the staff came across. Obviously, we will have that plan for the full council, and we'll be able to compare that back against the data from Homes for Haringey. I mean, what I would say by that is, it'd be interesting to see where the staff sit, relatively speaking, but I'm not sure that necessarily the guiding factor in their satisfaction will be the fact that they've come back into the council, and maybe other factors as well, but we'll be able to drill down and understand some of that. And we always will do some workshopping as well underneath the staff survey to kind of understand that. I'd say that the main issue that I've picked up is that the one thing that with an Alamo and with Homes for Haringey was that they had a clear identity as a sort of entity that was solely focused on housing. And some staff said to me, as you know, we're part of a wider council, there's all sorts of things. You know, when we get a weekly message, it's no longer from a managing director of a housing company, we might be hearing about all sorts of things which are less relevant to us. But it's actually, we'd like to have that more dedicated sort of channel around housing in a way. So we myself and the directors have come in, or the assistant directors have come in, sort of trying to work out how we do that. We've been doing things like sort of the assistant directors tour event where we go out to places like the depot, best speak to staff and listen to their questions and make sure that those forums are in place. I think we still need to think about what other farm staff forums we want to put in place. But I think that's a good question. I'll probably take away and give some thought to. In terms of the vision for how we kind of increase capacity, the pairs area in particular is a really difficult area to recruit, where there's a lot of competition and there's increasing demand. And you know, particularly as councils and housing associations have to do more and more work to deal with things like fire safety regulations and all of those sorts of things. So it's a skill shortage area. But sort of turning that on its head, I suppose my vision would be if we can try and upskill our existing staff and whether we can work with local colleges, something that I, you know, council knowledge have done as well as work with local colleges around upskilling, because actually what we want to do is make sure that perhaps single trade operatives can maybe sort of become multi-trade operatives, which will lead to better paid jobs. And I think one of the pieces of work we need to do is review job descriptions to enable that to happen, but also put the investment into that training for those staff that want it. Not all staff will, but we certainly know that some will. So I think that is a big area where we'd like to do staff development. If I answer.
Yes, thank you. Julie, you want to come in?
Just a practical question. You said you've recruited to the post of Operational Director of Housing Services, and it says vacant on the diagram.
It's only last week.
Is there a name?
Well, we have appointed someone, but they're still doing the kind of handing the notice into the current employer and things like that. Some members of the panel were on, well, particularly the chair of the panel was on the recruitment. I hope to be able to make an announcement about that quite soon, but we have made an appointment and they have accepted, but they just need to do the bit at their end.
You want to come? Yes.
Yeah, could I was just going to come and support David on a particular point around apprenticeships, councillor. I was talking to my team about this morning. We have a post in human resources that deals with apprenticeships, and we're bolstering capacity in that area. And we were just talking this morning about potentially doing outreach to schools and colleges. We're very happy to work with David's team to focus some of that work on trade roles, as you suggested.
That's a slight point I'd like to raise in terms of your vans and things. Why are they wearing Harringay livery?
Yes, that is one. So there, I mean, as you can imagine, the insourcing, there was about 300 lines on the kind of project plan for insourcing ones for Harringay. The updating the vans and signage is one which I don't think we progressed as quickly as I would have liked. There was an issue, and we had to basically novate all of the contracts that were forced Harringay back into the council. The vans are supplied by an external company, and there was a bit of a delay in novating that contract. So we're going through the process now of updating the vans, so they'll be updated with Harringay Council Housing Services signage there. And I do agree with you, it's important because slightly unhelpfully, there's still things on the website on those vans. I've said that if you go on the website, it still links through to the council page, so it's not, people will still get there, but I'd rather that they don't have to follow that route.
Okay, got it. Anyone else? Thank you. Thank you for that. The report is to be noted. Is it noted? Yes. Item 8, people's.
That's me, councillor. Thank you very much. I should just give a quick introduction. It follows on actually from David's presentation, because David spoke about the insourcing of homes for Harringay, and I mentioned at the previous committee meeting that the figures would look quite different following the insourcing of homes for Harringay, and you'll see in the appendix that that is indeed the case. The workforce has increased by 27%, and therefore our base pay has also increased by 25%, on the 740 headcount. The total percentage of agency workers has dropped, and it would be disingenuous of me to suggest that that is a result of concerted management action, although management do want to take concerted action on agency staff, and I know I can talk about that further in a future item. However, because Homes for Harringay had a lower proportion of agency staff versus the total workforce in the council, insourcing that service has resulted in an overall drop to 16% of agency staff of the total workforce. We've got 73 off payroll workers who have a day rate of over £500. We agreed some time ago to start reporting this specific figure to the committee, so you can see it in the report and in the appendices. And you'll also see that sickness rates have reduced during the period. Now, that was a slight surprise to me. So I had some additional work done to see if it was a kind of a one-off blip or a decrease trend. It isn't a trend. The sickness rate has gone back up. So there were some unusual items in previous month, which has led to a dip, but it's back up again now. And the other thing I want to say on that is you can expect it to increase in future months. Part of the issue is that with the insourcing of homes for Haringey, sickness wasn't recorded in the same way. And because this is based on a rolling year figure, we don't have all of the sickness data going back that far for all the homes for Haringey employees. So as they remain with us for longer, then the sickness rate will naturally go up because you'll be including more of their sickness in the figure, whereas at the moment, a lot of it's showing zero because they haven't been here a year. So that's just kind of an explanation of why it's dipped and why it will increase in future reports, even with management action taken to reduce sickness. I'm happy to take
Thank you.
any questions.
I'm happy to take any questions. Does anyone want to make him happy? Yes, Julie.
I'm just looking at the off-roll payroll, the off-payroll workforce, the interim. Because but on a workforce 2,000 something,
Yes,
and now we have 73
yes,
on a workforce of 3,500.
yes.
Okay, well, that's an improvement.
It's an improvement, but it's an improvement because Homes for Haringey cheaped in and had very few agency workers paid £500 or more. So you're right, the proportion has decreased, but that is a result of Homes for Haringey transferring 740 head count in with a much lower. It's the same argument as the general off payroll workforce. The proportion that Homes for Haringey had of those workers was lower.
Yes, sir. And
There's 43 agreements around 40. I'm just seeing with that concern because we'd hope that people under 40 would stay in the council and the mass good experience, and they may go into another borough with all the experience that the mass took at Haringey and elsewhere. It's something
That's a very fair question. We measure this because as a borough, we have one of the lowest percentages of workforce aged under 40 of our benchmark group in London. So this is why we measure this particular statistic. As 51% of new starters were under 40 and 43% of leavers were under 40, that indicates a good trend rather than a bad one. You've got higher proportion of starters than leavers. Obviously, we would like to see a lower percentage of leavers under 40, but the balance at the moment indicates an improving trend. Well, we're always encouraging people to stay. Obviously, we're not fully in control of whether people stay or go. It depends on career opportunities elsewhere. But one of the ways in which we encourage younger workers to start with us is as part of our apprenticeships work. So we've done some concerted work on apprenticeships, and heard me mention as part of the previous item that we're strengthening that team, and we'll look to work with David's team in particular on trade apprenticeships, which are obviously a very good initiative. Yes, absolutely. Yes, and one of the reasons why we do this in the way that we do is that we want to take on apprentices and then progress them into full-time employment. What we don't want to do is it will be, I say easy, it will be easy, but it will be possible to employ loads of apprentices. Then at the end of the 2 years, we wouldn't have enough jobs. So then we would be releasing them into the workforce First, that's not right for them because you do an apprenticeship to secure employment. And secondly, we'll have spent time and effort training people to then release them to practice their skills elsewhere. We want to retain them. So we do want to increase apprenticeships, but we want to make sure that we do it in a sustainable way.
Councillor Ali?
Positive note, I'm actually delighted to see that there's far more vacancies now for apprenticeships in parks. And it's on cash research on the website. That's a really good sort of positive thing to remark, to be commended to all those involved. The other thing I want to actually mention was, again, another cursory research. We compare our neighbouring local authorities to Harringay. We tend to have far more vacancies than our neighbouring boroughs. And I don't know if there's any trend in terms of we are trying to build capacity, or we just have far more vacancies and we're willing. Is there some serious reason why? Because I've seen that happening quite often since May. That we have a large number of vacancies. We are filling a good number of them. We're still offering, well, compared to our neighbouring boroughs, like very few. So that's a Harringay specific thing where we are keen to recruit more. We have just more vacancies. Or we're growing the service.
I think
fancy.
It will be a variety of all those things, councillor. But what I would say is that obviously the financial situation of the council is difficult than it perhaps was in the past. So you will likely to see the number of vacancies advertised reduce. So yes, we have got a lot of vacancies advertised at the moment, and we have had a sustained period of quite a high number of vacancies advertised. What you'll also see that we have a fairly high 700, and if you add the 702 to 73, it's 775 agency staff. And as I say, the council is very keen to reduce that number and would like to have a sustained reduction in agency staff through making more permanent opportunities available.
Okay. Anyone else? Report is here for nothing because it could be no. Item 9.
Thank you very much, Chair. That's me again on the pay policy statement. So every year the council is required by the Localism Act 2011 to agree and publish a pay policy statement. It is this committee's role to approve the statement and remit it to full council for final approval. It does have to be full council with final approval for this, again, in the Localism Act 2011. This has been the case for a number of years. There have been no substantive changes made to our pay policy this year, so this is substantially the same policy as we have operated for a number of years now. We have updated the ratios on page 37 of your agenda, but they remain broadly the same and don't give us any cause for concern. Second question.
Council agreed with these workers an uplifting. Okay.
The pay award for 2022 isn't yet agreed, councillor. It's awaiting a union response to the pay award 2022. So the pay award 2021 was implemented, but we're still awaiting a response from trade unions on the pay award 2022. But that's, if agreed, that will be automatically implemented because it's part of their terms and conditions of employment.
Where's the money going to come from? Can we put aside for government?
The money, the offer being made is nationally £1,925 on each pay point, which translates to 2,220. It's either 8 or 9, and I can't remember which. I'm sorry, I think it's 9, so that's divisible by 3. £2,229 on the London scales, and that's the offer that's on the table at the moment from the national employers and being discussed with the national trade unions. So it's not, the council doesn't have a direct role in those negotiations.
Okay. Then, yes, Councillor Ali.
Quick question. In terms of the mean pay, has that changed somewhat since last year? I don't have access to last year's report. Just curious to know if it's slightly higher, slightly lower, stay the same, and how's it compared to other inner London boroughs?
The median, I don't know the answer to that, councillor. It hasn't moved much. You may expect the median to move next year with the insourcing of Homes for Harringay. It hasn't moved much this year because they've only just been insourced, so usually have a relatively small impact. I would expect it to probably reduce the median pay next year, but we'll wait and see. How it compares to other London boroughs, I don't know, but I'll find out and I'll let you know, councillor.
That been noted?
Agreed.
Item 10, fair policy.
Thank you very much, Chair. That is me again. The schools pay policy that you will find in the supplementary pack, I believe. Thank you, pages 7 to 40 on the supplementary agenda. This is a similar vein to the last report, and that this committee agrees it every year. With this report, it is just this committee agreeing the schools pay policy. The council has very little discretion in this. This is based on orders laid in Parliament by the Department for Education, and what happens then is the council translates that into our model pay policy. And I apologise for the lateness of the circulation of this particular policy. It's because the government were quite late this year in laying the regulations. We did want to get to this committee rather than February was, because February did feel rather late. But the regulations were only laid on the 14th of October, and hence this was marked as to follow on the agenda. And like I say, the council has very little discretion on this because most of it, in fact, almost all of it, is nationally decided. Happy to take any questions again.
Yes.
Just a comment, really. This policy includes kind of draft advice on head teacher. Or it's not draft, it's advice on head teacher. This big squeeze on school budgets now. It's very important to establish how many of our head teachers are being paid outside the group side of school. Because this is a huge drain on a lot of our budgets. And Haringey head teachers are already taking a long time. So can't really argue that there's a recruitment incentive there. And I know that the unions have gone to enormous lengths to gather information on the group sides for schools and the individual pay range for instance. And there's quite a lot of evidence of establishing where it is that heads are paid top group size, about 25%. And I think this encourage the school's HR department to have a really serious look at where this is happening. Because if there are redundancies in school, support staff and more junior staff end up being squeezed out of their jobs, it often happen in schools where head teachers are being paid as much as 30,000 more than they should be. And I just think there is, I think that's that to be prepared to see governing bodies, especially when it's your point. But I do think there's a role for saying to governing bodies, very frankly, you do realise, don't you, that you the individual school ISR for the head teacher position. It could be a significant and it could end in real embarrassment. You know, sometimes these things happen out of greed, but because appreciation for somebody's work and not a real understanding of the fact that there's a 7-point range for the students. And you can't go above that except under fairly stringent conditions prescribed by the school teachers paying conditions doctrine. I sat on 6 governing bodies and I have never.
Okay, Councillor Ali.
Just on an addendum to that point, actually, I think I'm keen to get sort of advice from more experienced colleagues. One of the things that I've been made aware of about this is that the role that schools HR plays is not as significant as the head. What I've always been banging on about is that schools HR should be taking a strong approach in training governors in terms of understanding how the pay award is actually offered. At the moment, to my knowledge, it's done by the Haringey Education Partnership. I think that's absolutely inappropriate because they're not the ones who are able to give the best place advice for governors to make sure that the heads on the right pay scale. So I will really urge again schools HR to take this away, to work with HEP, to work with school directly, but they should be the driving seat behind this rather than needing to HEP to give that trade to governments. And a lot of the governments, to their credit, again, it's a school line involved in the past. Again, it wasn't very sufficient, wasn't aware of the actual pay scales and pay awards and pay grades available to them. And it just becomes a very informal arrangement where people are being paid through the nose. beyond what the scales at the minute. So I'll really urge school HR to look into this.
If I could just come back on that one, Chair. If I could answer both points, I don't disagree with the points that are being made. That what I would say is that, as everyone recognises, the responsibility for head teacher pay doesn't sit with the HR team of the council, sits with government. So the other point I would make is that schools are entitled and do by their HR support from whomever they choose. Some of it is bought from schools HR at the council, but some of it isn't. It's bought from job providers at other public or private sectors. So there is limited, in some cases, ways to influence them.
Just come back on that. I think this is quite a simple conversation. I think if most governors or the pay committee, if they knew, and there is a role, an external advisor who comes in and sits with the pay committee and advises them, but that is a difficult situation really, because the point of, in a way, a client relationship with the head teacher, in my experience. The conversation to have is your school is a group 3. Most of our primary schools, almost all, are group 3 primary schools. And furthermore, all of our secondary schools, none of them are at the top of the group size, but all the heads are paid at the very top of the leadership, on the final point of the leadership spine, and some beyond that, all our secondary heads. But if you said to primary governors, your school is a group 3, the maximum ISR are the 7 points at the top of that range. That means that the maximum salary for your school should be this much. It's about 90,000. You can pay more. You can pay 25% more, but you have to write a business case. That business case ought to be reviewable under an FOI. It should be possible to get hold of what the governors have put together to back the decision to exceed the group size. But that simple piece of training will come as a surprise to many governors. And actually, if you're threatening redundancies and there is potential for strike action, and people moving into the alternates, not unlikely, the very first thing that the unions will do is see where the additional money is going. And very often, and I've got experience in it, the head is being paid 2 support staff salaries above what they should be paying. If you want to make redundancies, that could be extremely uncomfortable for people. So that conversation, how the governors then resolve it, is a matter for them. But I think the job of pointing out, school finance are quite good on things like this as well, I think. But having them go to actually spell it out to governors in the process, the performance management process. In fact, that successful performance management does not mean an increase in pay if your head is already at the top of the group. So
Again, I don't disagree. I think we will recognise that, as you say, it's for the governors to resolve the issue. Schools HR has limited power. But the only thing I'd say is that you recognise that the advisor to the governing bodies has a client relation to schools HR. So there's a traded relationship there as well. It's a very difficult line to tread for schools HR, because it's really important that the school gets straight professional HR advice, and that's what they buy from us. But they buy it, so it's a quite a hard line to tread.
Okay, thank you for that. So that report be noted, and we move on to item 8. Which is policy.
That is me again, Chair. You'll be sick of my voice by then tonight. So this again is in the supplementary pack, and this item, I'm just going to find it. So this item proposes a change to section 6 of the recruitment policy. The committee considered the council's recruitment policy in March 2021 and determined, and Since then, trade unions have had discussions with officers and members, and this culminated in a discussion at the joint consultative board between trade unions and members, which has led to this report to propose changing the policy wording. And there are, you'll see in section 5, the changes proposed. There are two main changes proposed with the new wording. The first change is to, rather than advertising all vacancies internally and externally in the first instance, to allow managers to select the most appropriate recruitment approach for their roles, whether that be internal or external. And the second proposed change is to allow some discretion for the head of paid service to implement temp to perm arrangements on a controlled basis with appropriate safeguards in place. So the policy wording is here, but that would be backed up by a big practice note with appropriate safeguards in place to ensure it's fair, open, transparent.
Look, just a minute, Dan. This matter came before this committee, I believe, 21.
March 2021, Chair, yeah.
So why is it necessary to change it now?
Well, what has happened since March 2021, Chair, is that the trade unions have asked members to consider changing it back to the wording that applied, or similar wording to that applied pre-2021.
Why?
And it was the joint, I have to get the termination right, the consultative board, I can't remember the wording offhand, the consultative board between, thank you, JCB, between trade unions and members that agree to bring this report here. So that is why the committee is considering it today, because it was the agreement of that board to bring this report here. And like I said, there are two proposed changes. They're severable.
Yeah, can I
Yes.
propose, since this only came to us yesterday, can I propose that we agree the second recommendation, which is to
Could you just read this out so people clear what they agreed?
Yes.
If you wouldn't mind, please.
Shall I read it out for you, Councillor? So the wording that Councillor Davies is referring to is the council is to include in the policy statement, the council does not routinely use temp to perm arrangements, but there are circumstances where this could be appropriate. The head of paid service must authorise such arrangements.
Can I propose, I think in view of the fact that the council is wrestling with a large number of agency staff, that we do intend to bring down the numbers, and that this is a mechanism for doing it, and there's some evidence that this represents shortage areas, that we could agree that today. As for the other part of the proposal, I agree with you, Chair, that we only recently rejected it. And I think that what I would propose in addition to that is a opening a discussion with the unions to work out exactly what it is that they want to achieve from the change, to see if there are things. If they are underpinned by a desire for more local recruitment and enhancing the prospects of our own staff, those are not unworthy aims, but we are also committed to widespread advertising of jobs and external recruitment for permanent promotions. But I think there is some scope for us to look at sideways moves, secondments, positions, things that we haven't really been using as well as we should have done. We have been very reliant on agency staff. So could I propose that we agree the second recommendation and discuss, bring the other one back to the next meeting when we've had a proper discussion with unions?
Okay. Yes, this one.
If that would need to be seconded.
It needs to second it.
Yeah.
Well, I second it. Good.
Is that, were there any financial or legal issues with that, just for the record or any?
It's fine.
Just on what we've read, the second part. So there will be sort of practice notes, detailed practice notes. I'll be really keen to see how we're going to.
Very happy to circulate those to the committee, Chair.
Agree.
And just to say, one of the things that we would also consider is whether there are ramifications for employees working in schools, because that just wouldn't fly as it stands with schools content.
No, this policy would not apply to schools. In the same way that our recruitment policy doesn't apply to schools.
But there could be arguments made.
Yeah, your
Yes.
blessing. Can I just clarify this last wording about head of pay service? Is it the case where the safeguards will necessarily detect, but the safeguards basically mean that there's a standardized practice of how it's done? It won't necessarily be the signature of the head of pay service. He or she won't be observing every single temp to permanent arrangement.
That's absolutely right. So the intention
Delegated things.
the intention of this wording is that head of pay service authorises the circumstances in which this might happen, not authorise every single case.
No, that's much more.
But I will, like I said, when we have a practice now, I will circulate it to the committee so that you can satisfy yourselves that what I've said to you this evening is actually going to happen.
Reasons why we don't go to external.
That's the manager deemed as that's their thinking.
Yeah,
Why-
and,
The reasonable rationale from the manager as to why they don't do that.
and also, I mean, the council does want to reduce agency staff and wants to do it at pace, and this is a way to do it at pace.
And does agency staff need the same as consultants? Is there a difference between the two?
There's no actual definition of the word consultants. No one's ever given me one. Everyone has a different definition. Agency staff it will be defined in the practice note, but it will be defined as agency staff are workers who work for the council but not employed by the council and work through our agency partner matrix. So there'll be a definition of workers that are covered by this.
So if you are a carpenter and you work for council doing carpentry work, does that make you agency staff?
No, not necessarily. It might do.
Why doesn't it?
Well, if you're a carpenter working for the council, employed by the council, then you're employed by the council. If you're an agency carpenter working through our agency provider matrix, then you are an agency worker. But as I said in the previous report, those sorts of trades have a far lower percentage of agency workers in them than other posts in the council.
So social workers are one.
Yeah, social workers has a high prevalence of agency staff.
Is that?
It's quite difficult, Chair, to recruit permanent social workers. So there are all sorts of reasons why social workers might be used, but also why agency workers might be used. But one of the primary reasons in social care is that it's very difficult to recruit permanent social workers.
Okay, thanks.
So
Yes, sir.
so if someone is on a particular pay scale, paid up a certain level, would they be classified? Just say someone was paid. They also be in a position to.
But only onto council pay scales, councillor. We don't pay. The council has a set of pay scales. Now, it's accepted that agency workers don't always work for those pay scales, but we will not be bringing agency workers across on agency worker pay. We only employ employees on our own pay scales.
Okay, thank you for that. We move on to item 12. Which are policy up to date.
For the record, Chair, can we just confirm that we agreed to those recommendations, agreed to the
Oh, sorry.
additions as well, just that all agreed?
Yes.
Well, I'm taking the next
Yes.
item.
Item 12.
Dan, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about the new HR policies. So members would be aware that we have a policy schedule that sets out policies that we're due to review. period of time. There may be new policies or existing policies that we've updated. And we've got 4 to bring to you today. So I propose I maybe talk about each one and then answer any questions go on to each policy. So the first one is the ill health retirement policy, which is on page 47. This is
What page number is it? 47.
Yeah. This is a refresh of an existing policy. I think after that in 2012, so refresh. It needed the normal refreshments that you would have in the policy in terms of titles. It also sets out a stronger position in terms of alternative options to ill health retirement, referencing our new reasonable adjustments process that we've got and other processes, and also clarifies which you can make. It's just clarified what that is, and also put in process for ex-employees who then may currently another local authority make that process. So that's sort of that one is a refresh, if you like.
Any questions on that?
Yes, which I'm just.
Speak up a bit, please, if you would mind.
Sorry, Chair. Assuming that's gone through a conversation with trade unions.
Yes, sorry, I should have said. So all of these policies have gone through extensive consultation. So trade unions, we've got a manager and also our staff network groups.
Thank you.
Area of acting up.
So you have, do we need to approve each one as we go? What do you want to do? Is that one approved? And we can move.
Yes.
Thank you. So the next one is the honorarium acting and secondment. So we've had 2 existing policies for acting up and secondment. The acting up policy didn't have an upper limit on how long somebody could act up for. The secondment one did over 2 years. We didn't have a policy around honorarium, so we're putting together those 3 to put some clarity and some process around this, and also something in terms of assessment and review. We've got some clear definitions of what each one of those are. We've also set out what the expectations would be around family arrangements in each of those circumstances, in the maximum length, and also setting out if that were to be extended. So there might be some limited circumstances where we may want to extend an acting up or secondment, for example, if we know we're about to do a restructure or there's a funding situation which is about to end, but there's years, for example. We've also put in a process to enable us to monitor that, linked in with the HR area. On the back of this policy, if this is approved, then we will then be working very closely with the leadership team to make sure that the current acting up on honorariums and secondments to make it be a launch pad.
Questions? Yes, Julie.
Can I be a pedant?
What?
Honoraria, it's plural, I'm used to, an honorarium is the singular. That it's sort of all over the place at different points. It makes sense. So it says honorariums and then honoraria. Anyway, that's it. Sorting. Secondly, the issue of 2 people job sharing and act up. How does that work in terms of the job sharing, the additional remuneration? But how do they job share the additional hours, for example, or the additional responsibilities? Does one say, well, 2 days a week I'll be answering questions on this, and the remaining 3 days it's in?
Either it's particular parts of the job which are then put out to someone. So you might have that's arrangement, for example, in a maternity cover. If somebody's off on maternity leave, it might be that a part of the job goes to one person and the part goes to the other, and that is example. So it might depend on the skills that you've got and the skills of the people to then act up into that situation.
Yes, sir.
Criteria. Do you have any sort of safeguards as a definition of secondments going beyond 2 years? What's in sort of plans as how do you envision be avoiding that. That's absolutely necessary.
Yeah, so that it'll be a very similar process for acting up and secondment. So both will be managed through the HR business partner. And they would need to set out the exceptional circumstances why that. I said it could be, as I said, a restructure, or it could be that on a secondment only and the funding's been extended for another. But it's to put that in that there's a definite reason for doing that rather than we just want that. Obviously, then
It's an scenario when this person is extending more than once.
up to a maximum of 3 years of 2, so it's 2 years and then 2 times 6 month extensions.
So no more than 3 years.
That policy be agreed.
Yes,
It's absence.
It's absence. So it's quite a large policy. It's a policy obviously that we that's used quite a lot. Last reviewed in 2012, so due for review. In terms of this allowance, that hasn't changed, just to be clear about that. What we have achieved, I think, is a better balance. I think the last policy was all around the process and sort of managing sickness. This one we tried to improve that process. So we used to have intermediate stages. Now we've got clear stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. So to make that process clearer for managers when using it, but also a better balance in terms of focus on sort of well-being of employees, reasonable adjustments as I talked about earlier, and sort of making sure we've got that balance between the process and also support for the individual. We've improved our phased returns, I believe. So phased returns from sickness, an individual used to have to use their own annual leave or be on sick leave for any hours that they weren't working. So we're saying for any phased return up to 6 weeks, that doesn't have to happen. We're improving phased return process so the individual doesn't worry about being on sick leave for the hours working, and sort of better definitions throughout the process. Come on to that in the next item, but as part of the sort of consultation in this, that's well received with our disability and as part of this consultation.
The question, Julie.
On page 72, occupational health is a service that assists managers to manage an employee sickness. I think that's, I mean, first off, I think HR, the role to support managers in managing the sickness. Occupational health have got a crucial role as the doctor or patient employee. Yeah. Tackling factors in the workplace that might be contributing to worsen. So I just thought it's probably too late, but that factor of it being having a supportive role for the employee, because it's also about preventing the factors that make an employee sick in the workplace, worsening an existing condition. I worry that a manager would see that. I think, well, I've got occupational health, I've got to support my approach here, and actually the duty of the doctor is to support the patient.
They'll make a number of recommendations and seek to implement wherever possible. So we can prove that.
Could I just come in on that as well, Councillor? Firstly, it's never too late for the committee to make changes to policies that are being proposed for you to agree. This is your role. I do think that there's a difference between the role of the occupational health doctor and the role of the individual's GP, though. So the occupational health doctor, you're quite right, should point out to us factors about the work that might improve or might be causing the issue. But I think it's much more the role of the individual's GP to look at the effect on the employee and deal with the symptoms of the employee. So occupational health has the responsibility to look at the work-related factors, but the individual's GP has much more responsibility to deal with the individual and the individual alone.
Well, the other factor, of course, is that occupational health is there to prevent the possibility that the employee will even sue the employer for worsening a condition.
Yeah.
But I get the point. It's about the workplace and not life in general and the condition in general. But in my experience, they do have a double facing role, and that should be. A lot of employees are terrified of being sent to occupational health. They'll see it as a punitive measure that's going to lead to them losing a job. And in my experience, it's the opposite.
It's there to support. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just on 11.5, stress, that's quite a growing issue in the workplace, and I think post-pandemic it's even we've got EAP, but I'm wondering, is it common practice from the council to actually refer more broadly, maybe not necessarily into policy, but more wellbeing strategies spoken at the last meeting about external sources of support, how to cope with stress and sort of working under pressure. So that's a very growing area now of sickness, especially in the kind of jobs that that's also involved in that standard. So just wanted to sort of make that clear that we shouldn't just, are we just relying on the EAP? Are we working sort of external third party sort of signposting alternatives for them to sort of avoid that scale situation where they're saying, well, we have the EAP, which is a kind of buy-in option that councils buy into. However, there's resources out there beyond that.
Absolutely. So in terms of occupational health, they will often recommend that we do an internal stress risk assessment, or the one that's recommended by the so we can carry those out. So we've got those mechanisms, and we've also got some mechanisms for the EAP. I think if somebody is reporting workplace stress, we would always, within my team, encourage a manager to do an early referral to occupational as well. So that sickness grows, so that we can try and manage it, because obviously we know if we manage it, the sooner we're going to get a better outcome. We have got the employee assistance program, and then we've got a number of other things that we've do really through our wellbeing hubs. So we've just set good signposts for employees, and just so that EAP are able to then signpost on organisations depending on what it. So internal mental health as aiders as well, so a number of staff who are trained internally.
You speak up a bit.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So I was just talking about the mental health first aiders internally. That is a number of staff that people can bring and get advice from.
Okay. Did this policy agree? Disability leave.
Yeah, thank you. So this is sort of an addendum which will probably be going into the leave policy. But when we were talking to our staff network groups and our trade unions about the sickness policy, we discussed the possibility of disability, proactive things that we're doing to support our staff who do have a disability. So what we're proposing is to introduce 5 days per annum on a rolling basis, pro rata for part-time staff that they can use where they have where they identify disability for assessment, treatment, or rehabilitation. So if somebody's sick due to their disability, then that is recorded as disability-related sickness rather than just sickness. This is, for example, somebody has had rehab sessions. They could that it's adding to a sickness record, even if it is disability sickness. They're not using their own leave, so it's a supportive mechanism for our staff. And this proposal very well received by our trade unions in this
That's what I was going to say. It's fantastic.
Sorry?
It's commendable, Chair. It's brilliant policy.
Okay.
It's really progressive. It's really thinking. Thank you.
Maybe agree? Thank you. Now come on to item 13. Because it's for the press and public. We will now be considering item 14, which contains consent information. we will move into exclude the press and public from the remainder of the meeting to consider this exempt information as defined on the section on the paragraph 1, 2, 3, 5, on Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Is the exemption of the press and public for these items agreed by members? If anyone has any comments on the objection to this, please speak now. Otherwise, audio please. I will make the, could I, say, we also will look under the